Hello, and thank you for joining. My name is Anna Donnelly. I am a services product manager here at Insight, and I specialize in Microsoft Modern Work. These days, it's a lot of conversations about Copilot, and we're going to continue that theme today and talk a little bit about lessons learned for deploying Copilot to your organization. That's relevant to us because we have had Copilot here at Insight since August of last year, and we've been helping clients since that time as well. So we are going to share some of our lessons learned. We're going to talk about best practices for implementation, how to talk to your end users about functionality and maturity. We'll talk a little bit about Copilot Studio and right sizing your mitigation efforts, and then a new feature called SharePoint Restricted Search. And then we will talk a little bit about our top best practices. So thank you again for joining. Here we go. So first of all, let's talk about what we've done here at Insight. So when we first did this in August of 2023, there really wasn't much that we did to roll this out. We did it exactly in the wrong way. And in a lot of ways, I am glad that Insight did that on your behalf so that you can learn from us and not do it this way. So when we first joined the program as part of the Partner Early Access Program, there really was not a whole lot that we did to roll this out at first, right? We went ahead and gave it to the end users it was specifically relevant to, the ones who are like myself trying to figure out how we are going to roll this out to our clients, how we're going to provide the right services and tell them, everything that they need to know. So out of the 300 licenses that we had originally received, only about 70 of them were being used regularly. It was mostly folks like me who were designing services and specializing in Microsoft 365. And that's not really, who it should be going to. So we realized that in order to get folks to use it and to really understand, do we want this here at Insight, we'd have to roll it out, in the right way. So we did put together some adoption plans. We did some data estate planning. So we did look at some of the risk in our environment, the concerns about oversharing. We learned a lot about the things that we should be focused on versus some of the things that may or may not, be that much of a risk. And we did some persona analysis, right? So when we first rolled it out, we were just looking at people who it was really relevant to. And then, when we really started looking back into it, the folks that weren't using it may or may not have been the best folks to give it to, in the first place. So for a number of reasons, it's not going to apply to everybody, or this is not going to be super useful to everyone in your organization right now, today. So if you look at the folks who would get the most benefits out of Copilot for Microsoft 365 in the shortest period of time, so that would be, if you purchase licenses at $30 per user per month, you want to make sure that, you're getting some kind of a return on investment as quickly as possible. So for those folks that it really was relevant to, we identified who they would be so that we can make sure that they were actually using it and we can get the right feedback from them. And by January of 2024, we actually had made the decision to purchase additional licenses, and we had 5,000 license pool. We went ahead and distributed that globally. We took a lot of the lessons that we had learned from adoption planning. We deployed licenses, hopefully, mostly to the right people. We created the Center of Excellence for Copilot for Microsoft 365 and Viva Engage. We had champions in place who were really out there kind of talking about their experiences. We have, encouraging folks to share information with one another about what they are doing. We had coaching sessions and training that we had conducted internally for folks by user personas, so they knew this is how it applies to them, right? It's one thing to tell an end user, you can draft content in Word using Copilot for Microsoft 365 versus, hey, that proposal that you're creating several times a week, Copilot for Microsoft 365 can help you draft your proposal, right? So we want to find the things that apply specifically to end users so that they know why they should be using it. So we did all of these things starting in January of 2024. And I am proud to say that as of April of 2024, we are at 82% adoption of Copilot for Microsoft 365 across our organization, which is really good. I don't know if anyone knows anything about usage statistics and what is considered good adoption. But if we're looking at all of Microsoft 365 in the past, Microsoft always told us that if you have 40% adoption of the productivity tools, you're doing really, really well. 40%. Okay. Like if you look at a learning management system, so something like a LinkedIn Learning or a Percipio or whatever it is that you may have, it's like 30 to 40% adoption is considered good. We are at 82% here at Insight, which is very exciting. We've been able to take a lot of what we have learned and bring that to our clients to help them get success as well from Copilot for Microsoft 365. Additionally, because of the kind of encouragement that we had with having people post to Viva Engage, share their experiences, learn more information, we saw an exponential increase in the use of Viva Engage as well, which is really a great way to involve your end users in what's going on in your organization. So that's been a great lesson from that. And lastly, we're continuing that adoption activity. It's not stopped, right? So we have our occasional lunch and learns. We have folks who are getting together in various areas of our organization, whether it be sales to get additional training or human resources, understanding exactly how it is that they could use it. We've definitely been encouraging them to meet, to share those lessons, and to make sure that everybody is really getting as much as they can out of Copilot for Microsoft 365. So from that, most of what is asked of me for clients who purchase licenses or who are about to purchase licenses, a lot of times they're like, okay, well, what does the implementation plan look like? What's the timeline? What should we be doing, right? There's usually this kind of pre-pilot type of situation, right? Where folks are evaluating licensing and some of the technical pieces. So I call that pre-pilot. You can call it whatever you want, your early adopters or whatever it is, or your proof of concepts. But in this case, I'm calling it pre-pilot. It's usually a really small audience, right? It's the folks who are trying to figure out what Copilot for Microsoft 365 means specifically in your environment. And the first thing that I would absolutely recommend as you do this is set a vision for Copilot for Microsoft 365 and define success. Additionally, set some expectations for the pilot and put an end date on it, right? This could run forever. If we give this to a security organization, we tell them to evaluate it, it can run forever. And I won't say anything else about that other than to say, make sure that you set some expectations. You acknowledge that this is costing you money, right? $30 per user per month. If you've got 300 licenses or 3, that is not an insignificant amount of money. So you want to make sure that you are moving forward and that you have set some goals right up front and you know what you expect of everyone. You know what you expect to get out of the pilots into rolling this out to the rest of your org. So from there, during this time, this is when you are going to start assessing your data estate and the risk in your environment, right? This is when you begin that process. That is not to say that, there are no concerns, but there certainly are some things that we can do up front to mitigate risk and things that we need to prioritize up front. And again, within that first 30 days is really when you want to do it. Make sure that you're creating use cases and roadmaps and identifying personas. Again, this is what is going to make sure that you get Copilot in the hands of the people who are actually going to use it and get some useful productivity gains out of it. And then lastly, build your adoption plan. And then once you move into pilot, from there, you can test not only the functionality and see, how people like it and all of that, but also test the effectiveness of your adoption plan. So from there, you're enabling those licenses. And by the way, best practices for enabling licenses where your end user is concerned. enable the license, and then about a week later, tell your end users that they have it. Because if you enable the license and then you tell them right after, or maybe you say the license is going to be enabled tomorrow, they might be waiting for a little while for that update to their Microsoft 365 productivity apps, right? So it might take a few days to show up. This is going to mitigate a few of the support calls that you might get otherwise. So let them, log off, log on a few times, get the right updates, all of that. And then if they still don't have it after a week, you can give them the, opportunity to get some assistance. But if you want to save yourself a little bit on the back end, don't set the expectation that, hey, you have licenses now, and you just did it today or yesterday, right? Plan it accordingly. Um, so during your pilot, though, test that adoption plan, test your the use and the promotion of your center of excellence. And your center of excellence is really the place where you're going to get all of the information that you need for Copilot for Microsoft 365 from an end user training perspective. This is where you're going to go to connect with other people in the organization to get the right, policies, that the expectation of, if you are using Copilot for Microsoft 365, here's what we would expect of you. Um, and some of the ongoing training assistance and the connection, like engaging folks, that's where your center of excellence is going to be. The way that we deploy it, we've got a really nice script that we roll out, for our clients, and it's got everything that they need. But ultimately, just make sure that it is somewhere that is really easily accessible, and that you've got somebody who is kind of overseeing things to make sure that they're engaging folks, right? So take this training, attend this meeting, share your thoughts, right? You need somebody overseeing all of that. Continue your risk remediation. Like I said, there are going to be some things that you're just going to have to do immediately. There are other things that are nice to have. So do those things kind of in parallel with your rollout, and just know that you need to choose your audience, right? Choose your audience wisely, because maybe you don't want to give it to the person that has access to all of your legal content yet, until you get some of those risk pieces out of the way, right? So again, this is about making sure that you are getting the most value out of Copilot for Microsoft 365 in the shortest amount of time. So think about who you're giving it to. If they're presenting risk to the organization, maybe it's not them that you want to. And lastly, start your success measurement. You set some goals before you started all of this. Now, let's start looking at those sorts of things. Microsoft has given us a number of ways to look at the usage of Copilot for Microsoft 365. We always recommend that you get feedback from folks. You encourage people to use the feedback that's built right into the tool. So it's kind of like the thumbs up, thumbs down thing, and then you can provide your comments there as well. We as administrators would be able to see that. So make sure that you're telling folks, how to give feedback. And that they should also tell us when things are good, because sometimes they only use those features when it's bad, right? And then once you get to production, take the lessons learned you use from pilot and do a big rollout to the folks who it is relevant to. Make sure you're doing a good job at identifying your production audience, right? So that these, again, find the people who are actually going to use it, and perform some license reviews. So here in Insight, we have 5,000 licenses and we've got about 14,000 users. So we, licenses are at a premium. We want to make sure, again, that people are actually using it. So we do go through periodically and say, hey, you haven't used this since we deployed it to you. You've got another 2 weeks to show us that you're using it, and then we're going to take that license from you, and we're going to give it to somebody else. And then for everybody else, we give them an opportunity to state their case, right? If they want a license, they can ask for it, but they have to tell us why they want it, how they think they're going to use it. They need to get an approval for it. And again, this is, I feel like, has definitely contributed to the numbers that we have as far as usage is concerned, because we're making sure that it's relevant and that these are people that are really interested and are going to use it. And then from there, Make sure that you are pursuing advanced use cases, that you're looking at a roadmap, because the return on investments that you're going to get from Copilot for Microsoft 365 has a lot to do with, how you're going to extend its capabilities. And Microsoft is giving us an opportunity to do this with Copilot Studio. We'll talk about that in a minute. Which brings me to our next conversation. When you're talking to end users about Copilot for Microsoft 365, one of the best things that you can do is set an expectation of what Copilot for Microsoft 365 can actually do. Okay. I have to remind people that this is a product that has only been out since November of 2023. So it's been 6 months at this point in time. And there are some things that operate much better than others. There are some things that are still in preview, right? So whether or not you're aware of it is another question, right? But setting an expectation that just because something isn't working doesn't mean, number one, that it's broken. It doesn't mean that it will never work. But make sure that you're setting an expectation for how mature the functionality is and what use cases exist. Lots of use cases for Excel. But the functionality based on what we've seen perhaps in some of the videos, and when we see some of the content that Microsoft provides us, getting there sometimes is a little bit cumbersome, especially for your kind of average user. There are some requirements to even use Copilot in Excel. That includes making sure that it's saved to the cloud. It includes making sure that you're using it in a table. And then from there, the function is relatively limited, right? That said, the reason why we put this kind of on a quadrant scale, so like the magic quadrant or what have you, is because we're seeing things move into the right side here, right? If you would have asked me back in August where all of these things were, a lot of them were a lot closer to the left, right, for both the use cases and the functionality. But a lot of those things have moved well to the upper right. Sometimes they're always going to be in the lower right, right? For forms, you can create forms. That's it, right? And it functions really well. It does a really good job. You can almost get to a finished product if you tell it exactly what it is that you want. Whereas chat, so Microsoft 365 chat, if you're using it for work, which means that it's looking at content in Microsoft 365, that has lots of use cases, and it actually works really well. Especially in March, they updated it to use GPT-4, which is the latest model. It works really, really well, and it gives you references for the content that's there. Super powerful, right? So again, make sure you set an expectation for what works really well with your end users. It's going to save you a lot of the support requests and things on the back end. The other thing to this end as well, make sure that you're encouraging folks to talk to each other, right? This is a productivity tool. Every time a end user has a question about a formula, they are not calling the service desk. They're not calling, so-and-so in IT operations, right? They're usually asking the person across the hall from them or across the aisle or chatting their coworkers up or whatever, right? Looking up information on YouTube, whatever it may be. This is exactly the same type of situation. Okay, so moving on to Copilot Studio, this again is one of those things that is going to extend the capabilities of Copilot for Microsoft 365 and definitely get you more return on investment as a result. So you can do two things. You can build your own Copilots. So this is independent of Copilot for Microsoft 365, where you can point at a repository, something like that. You can create a chatbot. This is kind of the next evolution of Power Virtual Agents, if you are familiar with that. In the Power Platform, now you can create Power Virtual Agents using the natural language model. So your end users, instead of having to select from a list of potential conversations, now they can just have natural conversations with your chatbot. Secondly, you can customize Copilot for Microsoft 365. So you can create what are called plugins, which ultimately allow you to get a little bit more specific on the capabilities and what Copilot for Microsoft 365 is looking for. So if I created a Copilot for ServiceNow, I could potentially have it look at information about tickets at some point in time. We also might be able to have it enter a ticket on your behalf, right? So it allows you to interact with your data instead of having it just kind of feed you responses and information. There is a good article that we've put out that is about Copilot Copilot Studio. I would encourage everybody to take a look at it if you are curious. Understand that Copilot Studio is not going to be out of preview minimally. Microsoft says right now, is according to their roadmap, until November. So this is a relatively new thing. It is evolving all the time. And within the next couple of weeks here, we have Build coming up, which is Microsoft's conference for builders or developers. And there's supposed to be a lot of information about this. So stay tuned. So let's talk about risk efforts. This is the thing that everybody always wants to talk about, right? And the first thing that always comes up is, what do people have access to that they don't know they have access to that Copilot is going to surface? So this is certainly a concern, right? Especially if you are worried about what PII you might have in your environment. Maybe you have particular, requirements from the EU or the UK or something like that, that like will require this to happen. Understand that if you're concerned about this now, if they search in the right way, they can find this too. So this is a problem that already exists in your environment, right? And I feel like there's a little bit of extra focus on it because of Copilot for Microsoft 365. It is an issue, okay? To me, it's not the biggest issue. To me, the biggest issue is that Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a very powerful tool. There's lots of things that you can do with it, including ask it a question about content in your environment and getting an answer with references, right? Powerful. That also means that if somebody gets your credentials, they also have the opportunity to ask a question and get an answer with references. So you want to make sure that the people in your environment are who they say they are, in which case zero trust is very important. And again, this tends to sound scary, right? Do we really want to look at all of our security controls and solutions and all of that? If you have Microsoft 365 E5, you're more than half the way there to already having the right pieces in place that you need to move forward. So evaluate the right controls, the things that are going to make the most difference in the short term. And also, again, think about who you're going to give this to. Maybe it's not the right time to give it to legal, right? Maybe you need to get those things sewed up first, and then you give it to them. Whereas, the person that's, sitting in marketing who's using its draft content might be a little different for them. So prioritize zero trust. Again, make sure you're choosing the right audience, put the right controls in place. There's lots that we can do, right? Microsoft 365 E5 makes it pretty easy. They give you recommendations. Here's the big list of things that you should do to improve your security posture. There could be a lot, but like I said, there are some things that will make more difference in the short term that are important in the short term as well. So put those right controls in place. We love helping clients with these sorts of things. So, if you do need some assistance, insight is here. I'm going to skip over restricted search because we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But it definitely is a way for you to deploy Copilot for Microsoft 365 in your environment in the short term in a way that is not going to expose content. But it is not meant to be the long-term solution. The long-term solution is to do the right thing. But in the short term, it'll help. We'll talk about that in a second. Educate your users on data hygiene. So this is a couple of different things. So number one, biggest risk with oversharing and exposure to data is folks who are using share with everyone links in OneDrive for Business, in SharePoint. So if you are using that share with everyone or share with my organization or share with my X company, right? That means that that document now becomes part of the index that gets searched and is available to everyone. So sharing with everyone literally shares with, with everyone. Again, this is something that is an issue today in your environment, even if you don't have Copilot. So having this conversation with your end users about how you should be using um, share, how you should be saving versions of documents. If you're somebody who likes to do V1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of a document, that means that there's 5 versions of the same thing. How does Copilot know which one is the latest version is the one that we should be using? It doesn't. In a lot of cases, it's going to pick it up based on relevancy, which means that lots of people have accessed this document. But that doesn't mean that it is the latest version, right? You create a new version, nobody's accessed it. So with that said, um, version control becomes very important as well. So teaching your end users good data hygiene, use version control, be responsible about share with everyone, and certainly clean things up that aren't relevant anymore. This is a good time to talk about those sorts of things. And then lastly, continuously audit. This is not a point in time type of thing. Again, all of this is stuff that should be going on in your environment anyway. In a lot of organizations, it's something that everybody knew that they should be doing, right? But now that you're talking about Copilot, it's become even more pertinent. So make sure that you've got a plan in place for the longer term. Okay, so just very quickly on SharePoint restricted search, it allows you to curate 100 sites that can always be accessed if the end user has permission. So here are these 100 sites. If the end user has permission to them, always provide results from this. In addition to that, specific to the end user, they get content from their frequently visited SharePoint sites. So these are sites that they're actually going to. They get everything from their OneDrive, email, file folders, chats, anything that is specific to them, right? This isn't stuff that's shared from other people's OneDrive. This is their own. They get access to anything that they have viewed, edited, or created. So these are things that they are actually accessing. And then anything that has been shared directly with that end user is something that Copilot will look at and return responses on. So it mitigates the concern that how do I know that, they're not going to ask a question about information they weren't even sure, they didn't even know they had access to, right? In this case, it's looking at the stuff that the end user is actually accessing instead of the stuff that everybody is sharing irresponsibly, right? So it does eliminate those concerns about overexposure. It should be used as an interim solution, not a permanent solution. Get those things in order that you need to get in order, and then turn on search, for everybody, right? Turn on the correct way to search your environment because you know that everybody is safe and they're doing the things that they should be doing. But there are a couple of considerations. If you turn this on, that means that is search for all. Okay. So that means that if anyone is searching in Teams, if they're using the little search bar, even if they don't have Copilot for Microsoft 365, they're going to get this experience. And guess what? For anyone in your organization, it's also going to tell them that they have a limited search results right. So if someone is looking for information about HR that they never accessed before, and it's not one of those 100 curated sites, they might not be able to find it, right? That's not an issue if it's part of the 100. But if your taxonomy is all over the place, it might be difficult for you to choose the right 100 sites, in which case you might as well just get everything, corrected, get everything mitigated, your risk taken care of, all the right, pieces in place for your data estate, instead of just turning this on. So just make sure that you're prepared for all of that. Make sure that your end users know that it's on its way, because it's going to tell them either way, and then you're going to get a bunch of calls, right? Nobody wants that. Okay, almost to the end here. This is really kind of a recap of a lot of what I have said, but in the event that I didn't say it, we're going to go over it. So first of all, don't just give your licenses to IT. So don't just give it to people like me who are looking to break it and find out what it means. You want to give it to the business. You want to make sure that you're choosing the right audience. Set goals for your pilot, for your proof of concept, whatever you want to call it. Make sure it's not running forever. Remediate risk. Make your plan for continuous support. Give end users the opportunity to make a case for a license. If you're not sure who to give it to, say, okay, anybody can have it who can tell me how they want to use it and why they want to use it, right? It's a really good way to get super users, or to identify people who are early adopters or champions. Evaluate the Microsoft 365 adoption framework. Every adoption best practice is based on the Microsoft 365 adoption framework that has been around for a while, right? So if you have the right pieces in place, champion programs, if you have the right resources in place, if you're continuing to engage folks in activities related to adoption, you're going to be successful. But that starts with an evaluation of your capabilities today and what you need to be put in place for tomorrow, right? So look at these things before you begin. And as you roll it out, set expectations for what Copilot can do from the beginning. Remember the little magic quadrant? Share that, right? Bring business into communications, training, and adoption activity. I can't tell you how important this is. Insight is a company full of early adopters because we are a technology organization, in which case we've been really great about sharing information with each other, right? Really, there's a lot of people who are very enthusiastic. We've got plenty of people who will run lunch and learns, who will share their success stories. And that's part of the reason why we've been so successful here. So make sure that you're identifying those people who are your early adopters, who are your champions. Use them to communicate what they're doing. Use them to run training programs. It doesn't need to be all on IT or all on learning and development. And start parallel efforts for content cleanup. If you've never done this in your organization before, it is absolutely something that you should be doing. Digital content cleanup. I remember back in the day, once a year, we would have the big, paper cleanup. And I'm dating myself now, but you'd have the big paper cleanup day, right? And they would bring the giant confidential bins around, and they would encourage you to clean out the things or throw out the things that aren't relevant anymore into the confidential bin, and it would get shredded, right? We used to do that back when it was paper. We don't do that anymore. And the reality of the situation is it's way more accessible now that it is not paper. So start some efforts for content-wide digital cleanup. In the long term, share those success stories, use cases, ask for feedback. I can't tell you how important that is as well, because that will at least give you a pulse on how people are feeling about all of this and how people are feeling about how much you have engaged them to learn. Reward their participation if you are able to. If you've got a couple of champions who are really out there saying, here's all the great things that we're doing, or if you've got some folks who are putting together some really cool solutions to problems, reward them, recognize them if you can. Copilot Studio use cases. As you come across those things that are maybe not something that Copilot can do now, but perhaps you'll be able to do down the road with Copilot Studio, or maybe it's something that is on the roadmap that will eventually be able to be done. Make sure that you're kind of keeping those things in mind, even if you want to track them in a SharePoint list somewhere, something like that. It's good time to do that. Then you can come back and make sure that you're getting more value. And then lastly, Power Platform governance is important because Copilot Studio is part of that. So you need to make sure that your the apps that are created out there don't get out of control. Make sure that you've got that piece in place. As you kind of enter into this journey with Copilot, you can be prepared when people are ready to start using Copilot Studio. So, a little bit about Insight. This is everything we would be able to do with where Copilot for Microsoft 365 is concerned. We always begin with a readiness assessment, which essentially addresses pretty much everything that you've seen. All of the best practices will evaluate it, including the risk in your environment. And then from there, anything that you would need out of that, we could assist with from data cleanup to governance to adoption. All of this, by the way, is stuff that Microsoft, or I'm sorry, that stuff that Insight has been doing for years for our clients. It's all based on best practices for Microsoft 365. And guess what? Best practices for Microsoft 365 and best practices for Copilot for Microsoft 365 are the same exact thing. It's the things we've been telling our clients for a very, very long time. Clean up your data. Make sure that zero trust is in place, right? All that stuff we've been doing for a very long time. We would love to be able to help you. And to that end, I have come to the end of my road. But certainly, I'm going to let some other folks here tell you how you can engage us if you have any questions, if you need any assistance with anything that you've seen here today. So thank you very much for your time. We'll see you soon.